It's
Yes,
5
I'm sure
minutes
he will
past
do.
9. We're getting some great glitchy camera from Savika Anna, who looks like she's
Oh, yeah.
communicating with us from another
It
dimension.
really does.
Let's give her a nice big round of applause. And we're adding her to the stream.
I'm gonna disappear to.
Yeah, I have no idea why this is happening. Maybe it's because it's the first time I'm using this particular camera on this computer. I don't know.
Could be. The internet is possibly under great strain today as well. It's a
As
bit,
everyone's
it's
going
a,
back to work.
Yes, maybe. Yes, it's the 1st of September. Portugal's just come back online, Anna. Is that what it is?
Yeah, maybe my camera is just like still on vacation.
Well, we shall
Fair
see.
play.
And there's something in the top right-hand corner of your screen, which
That's my
again
shelf.
lends itself
That's
to
my
looking like
shelf.
you're trans-dimensional.
Yeah.
But it's coming in at the most amazing angle and
Yeah.
the way it's lit. So incredible. Thank you for the setup this morning. And I was going to ask you how you're doing. And you wanted to talk about healthcare. Is there a clue in that?
I'm gonna come.
All right, Mrs. M will come back to us later on. Thanks for joining us so far, Mrs.
Well, yeah. Bye, Louisa.
Oh,
a bit
go
late. No, it's not a particular clue. I think it's an important topic, and I'm kind of currently undergoing a bunch of medical examinations because I'm currently have an infection, but I don't know what it is that I have infected. So I'm on the digging phase. That it's kind of a pain. But
investigation.
well.
Okay. Well, that's a horrible place to be, isn't it? Where you don't quite know what's going on, and you're waiting for the medical minds to figure out what's going on. Can you tell us a little bit about your view then, as a Portuguese person, of your Portuguese health system here? Do you feel well served and supported in that process?
I think that the Portuguese service is great in terms of costs. As it has really low cost and it's fairly accessible. Most of the public health centers, however, are pretty understaffed.
Mhm.
So, but that's a downside. I think there have been efforts to improve that. For example, last week when I went to my family doctor, instead of my family doctor, I actually got his, not assistant, but another doctor that was in his team. So I actually found it very surprising that I managed to get the appointment so quick, because I called like on Thursday and I got an appointment for Tuesday. And that usually doesn't happen on the health centers unless it's an open appointment. But then I found out why. It's because my doctor apparently now has a team and other people that take patients in their place. And I think it can be a nice solution, because the family doctors end up having way too much patients. It's just not realistic for one person.
Okay.
And I think it's good that they have other support team that allows consultations to take place faster. And just 2 days ago, or on the news, I was seeing that they are announcing that they are going to open 130 something new health centers.
Great.
Which I think it's a great thing. I'm just a bit worried that it might just be an election thing, and once the elections are over, they kind of just put that on the back burner and leave it be. So I hope that's not the case, because it's very duly needed. But even more than new health centers, I think it would be very important to reinforce the teams, especially on hospitals, because the urgency waiting times, they can be absurd. It can be like 11, 12 hours waiting time to get an urgency appointment on a public hospital if you have like a yellow or a green bracelet. I don't know if it works the same way in other countries, but here in Portugal, you have kind of the urgency tier, so to say.
Yeah.
So red is very urgent, yellow is urgent, and green is not urgent. and the least urgency you have, the further down you get on the appointments, on the appointment list. So if you are green and someone yellow comes up, that person will have priority over the green, and same thing with the red. So whoever is on the lower end can wait very, very long time, depending on who shows up in the meantime.
Yes. Yeah. And then I think, well, there are a couple of things immediately from what you're sharing this morning. Politicians wouldn't do that, would they? They wouldn't make pre-election promises just to get themselves voted back in and then not do what they said they would do. That doesn't happen here in Portugal, does it?
Never.
Hey, well, thank you for helping us out with that. That's so reassuring and so good to know. So you think it might be a little bit of hyperbole and propaganda pre-election, and should we expect more of that? You know, what's the soonest election that there might be in
I
Portugal?
think more than that, I think one of the big problems it tends to be, especially when opposing parties get elected, so when the parties change, even though here in Portugal things are not very drastic when it comes to the opposing parties, like you don't have big extremes in general, except for Chega, but well, I don't think they're that close to getting elected. But what tends to happen when there's an opposing change of parties is that the new government tends to try and undo the things that the other does, and I think it's kind of silly. So instead of just trying to focus on making new things that are positive, sometimes they go and undo things that the previous one does, and it kind of feels like it's out of spite many times. So I think that's just really silly. But I think that happens everywhere, doesn't it?
I think you're right. But what I've noticed in Portugal is especially brutal. The way that the politicians address each other and their posters, the political campaigning and so on, seems pretty brutal to me. And that takes a bit of getting used to. Just need to say bon fin de semana to Victoria. Thank you for popping in this morning, Victoria. Have a lovely weekend down there in Portimao. The other thing I wanted to ask you about as we're talking about health this morning, Anna, and you mentioned that kind of triage system of prioritizing people according to their need, which of course is right. But does that mean, and within the context of preventative healthcare, it's like you have to get iller to get seen. So if you're green today and your situation worsens because you haven't been seen, you might become yellow, so to speak, literally as well, tomorrow. And then the only way of escalating yourself through and into the health system is by becoming iller. How is Portugal when it comes to preventative healthcare, not just in the system, but how are Portuguese people themselves about taking preventative care about their health, would you say, culturally?
I think that's an extremely important conversation to have. And I think that's one of the big problems of the Portuguese health system is the preventative healthcare is pretty much put on the back burner, especially because of lack of staff. Because the doctors and the hospitals, they are focused on what's a bigger priority, and they just don't have enough staff to give proper attention to low priority, and that's what happens in the preventative health. Is that often when you are going through the public health system, you have months and months of wait times to get a normal appointment, and they are often postponed. So sometimes you have an appointment for 6 months for now, and then a month before you have a letter postponing it another 2 months, and it just takes a really, really long time, and it's very hard to get the preventative health. And in that way, the health centers do help a bit because it tends to be a bit easier. It also depends on how overloaded they are, but it tends to be a lot easier to get appointments on health centers. And if you have a family doctor, it's usually you have some sort of priority to get appointments too. But that's another thing. There are wait lists with thousands and thousands of people to get a family doctor. Like I have my family doctor in Porto, ever since I was born, pretty much. And I never tried to change it. Even when I was living for years on the Algarve, I went and checked it at the time. And there was a wait list with like 3,000 people, and they said it would be like 2-3 years. And I'm like, no,
What?
I'll leave my family doctor in Porto.
Hold on a minute. So it would be 2 or 3 years before you got seen for what?
No,
A
not seen. Just be appointed a family doctor on a
Whoa.
different health center if I change the health center.
If you left, okay, forgive me. All right, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So that's why people stay where they are. They stay put, even if they
Yeah.
move to a different part of the country. You might. That's a different kind of travel tourism. That's inside
Yeah.
Portugal itself. Well, okay. Well, thank you for this insight from your Portuguese point of view. As an advisor to people coming here, what's the step plan for those coming here? And somebody who might be watching this from outside of Portugal at the moment, what's your recommendation of how to engage with healthcare here? And I use healthcare rather than health system because obviously you can do private or public well, anyone can, especially the visitors who might be coming. And of course, we know that the Americans especially like the good value health insurance premiums here. But what's the process, Anna? And what do you suggest to people when it comes to safeguarding and setting up for their healthcare here in Portugal?
I generally find that the public health system can be very good, especially for emergency situations, and it's very affordable on that because even if you have to get admitted to the hospital and spend a long period of time, it has a very low cost. Like my father was admitted to the hospital for like 6 months, and I think we paid like 140 euros, something like that.
And now American people are thinking, is that an hour? Is that a
Yeah.
day? Or...
So in that regard, it is amazing to be able to have that kind of support that is financially accessible for everyone. But because the preventative care is so hard, and it's so hard to get specialty appointments if you don't have an extremely urgent life-threatening situation, I definitely find it advantageous to have private health insurance. And they are not too expensive. And another interesting phenomenon here in Portugal is that the same doctors that are on the public system are often also on the private system. I've heard people being very surprised by that, but that's just normal here in Portugal. And even on a bunch of different hospitals, like you will find the same doctor in a bunch of different places. So,
it's you. Hello. Yes.
So yeah, it's just sometimes a matter of going to the hospital that you like the most.
Yes.
For example, like my election hospital, so to say, that I usually try and get my appointments is the Rábida Hospital in here in Porto Rábida, just outside the bridge. And I find it has great facilities, and I've had mostly positive experiences with the staff. That's another thing. I think one of the things here in Portugal can be lack of accountability, because although the American system is a bit excessive in the whole suing system and extreme legal consequences, it does create a lot of accountability, and professionals are forced to be professional
and highly insured. Yeah, that's part of it, isn't it? Yeah.
And a lot of what happens a lot in Portugal, and especially with preventative healthcare on the public health system, is because the system is so overloaded, and one of their priorities is to keep costs down. They often avoid to do examinations unless there's something urgent. So they will constantly, postpone exams like, MRIs and the more complex exams. Like those are really hard to get booked on the public system unless you have something urgent going on, because they try to, avoid them for cost reasons. So when it comes to preventative healthcare, things are sometimes very slow, and I think in the end they can even turn into bigger costs, because then the person has an urgency episode, and well, it's like you said, it goes from yellow to red or for green to yellow.
Sadly, the case, yeah, and that's within that's the kind of state health system's approach to preventative health care. How would you rate Portuguese people themselves in terms of taking care of themselves at home, so they don't need to engage so much, or are they like a lot of Western civilizations, as it were? It's like, well, I'll just do what I want and let the medical system take care of the consequences. Where would you place Portugal and Portuguese people on that spectrum?
I think it's not too bad. I think in a scale on 0 is we take care of everything and we don't go to doctors as much as possible, and 10 is we always goes to doctors anything that happens.
Yes.
I would say the Portuguese people would be like a 6 or 7. Like, it's not too, but I think they tend to go towards going to doctors more than actually avoiding it, also because it's generally accessible. And one of the phenomenon that can happen too is like older people that are lonely and so on,
Yes.
and go a lot to the health centers, and it's not making up problems, but they are constantly booking appointments, and sometimes it's just because they are lonely.
It is that's a phenomenon around the world, isn't it? For sure.
Yeah.
And it would appear that those people might be lacking a local community centre. I notice in Portugal there seems to be more of that social fabric, if you like, for people who might be lonely. They might have exhausted their local connections, of course. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it, with old folks? But it seems to me that, I mean, a couple of things come to mind in terms of public health. These community centres, in even in a small village, you'll see an association or a club that has a cafe, and it seems to be the meeting place and the beating heart of the community, if you like, where people gather, which I'm sure is very good for well-being. And the public gyms, the street gyms, if you like, and areas, they might be on a pavement, but they also might be part of a park. Anything else come to mind for you from that point of view of public health provision?
Well, yeah, I think in kinds of public locations that the community gathers in, it's like you said, it's mostly cafes and gardens.
Yeah.
And then in smaller locations where you don't have a really fancy, not fancy, but a go-to place, there's often like a leader that brings everyone around to their houses, and there's a bunch of activity there. So that happens a lot too.
Mm. Thank you for that, and thank you for this insight into healthcare in Portugal and health awareness and well-being. This is a health message, isn't it? And this is to do with certain types of comments in our community over the last few days, Anna. Setting boundaries is healthy. No problem at all getting rid of mean people. Your values, your channel, they can bog off. Which is a nice British phrase. I think everyone can understand what that means, even if they've never heard it before, or express themselves in a manner where they don't run roughshod over others. I think I have you down as a person with pretty healthy boundaries, Anna.
Yeah, people usually don't like healthy boundaries, though.
Would you care to say more on that?
Well, it's just a thing. Like, the reason that people often don't have healthy boundaries is because the people that tend to abuse those boundaries don't like to be put limits.
Yes.
And that's generally a psychological thing, and it's often a manipulation thing. Usually, people that don't like boundaries imposed are very often trying to manipulate something, or are just people that don't like to be told they are wrong. That also happens.
Yeah.
And generally, when you put a boundary and when you say no to something, that's the thing, you are saying no. And a lot of people don't react very positively when they hear a negative reply to something. So
Okay, an excellent insight into setting healthy boundaries there. And again, like help us with insight into Portuguese culture. Is this a culture in which people generally set healthy boundaries? Something we have noticed as foreigners.
No,
Oh,
it's
well,
not.
we do notice that Portuguese people can be very direct, but that's not necessarily related to setting healthy boundaries. That's just their
It
opinion.
can be, but it's usually on certain things. But I think in general that there are a lot of Portuguese people that are easily swayed around
Uh-huh.
because a lot of us, we genuinely want to help and we generally want to, um, help other people and have positive things and I think there's a cultural thing where people tendency avoid to say no, and that can be a bad thing too. I think that definitely helps on the hospitality side of things, but
Yes.
there's definitely a lot of people that get easily swayed and taken around to things they actually don't want, but just couldn't say no to.
Yeah, I've understood that finally. And a recent piece I've written for the Portugal Resident is about running a business. And when I was first trying to find out what to do, everyone would help me with their opinion and idea on the matter, because it is like it's a matter of public shame to not help people. I think in Portugal, which then can lead to people helping you, even if they don't really know what they're doing or if what they're saying is correct. But I love that the essential aim is to be helpful, even though the advice, as it turns out, and as I've experienced, might not be the best. There is a national urge to help, isn't there? But you're saying that people want to be liked, they want to help, but they might be swayed, and this isn't necessarily a country of healthy boundaries.
Yes, I
Right.
would say so. That it's not too bad. Like we aren't super easy to push over, but I would say that there are still a lot of things that could improve when it comes to boundaries.
Very good. And of course, we are talking in generalizations before anybody points that out. How else can you do
Yeah.
it? How else can you talk about a population without generalizing? And I think it is helpful to the foreigner, to the incomer, to learn a little bit from those generalizations about what goes on here in Portugal. I want to ask you also about complementary health, alternative health, holistic health, because that's of interest to many in our community, actually. Oh, maybe I won't get the chance to. She's gone. Louisa, what is that lime green potion you're drinking? Whilst we're in the realm of complementary and alternative health, Deagle's asking, what is that? Oh, here she is. She's come back.
No, literally my camera and microphone just turned themselves off.
Yeah, well, I thought you didn't want to talk about holistic health for a minute.
No, they just turned themselves off, and they're more glitchy now. So no idea what's
Well,
that.
we'll see how we get on. You're generally scheduled with us for half an hour, and that might be it. Okay, we shall see. We shall see if Anna can come back and join us. What is the lime green potion you're drinking? It's the weekend? Far too healthy looking, says Deagle. Pete adds to that. Louisa, if it's green and sloppy, you should either feed it to the plants or the bin, or see the doctor about it. You see, we've got a healthcare focus today, and Pete stepping in with a bit of health advice there. Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much indeed. You describe it later as looking like discharge. Thank you very much. Mrs. Emma is rejoining us, I think. Anna just crashed out of the show. Well, you can say for yourself what the green liquid was.
Yes, I've actually said in the chat. It's egg and kiwi.
So kiwi fruit.
Yeah, I ran out of bananas.
So you substitute. They're a lot more sour than a banana, aren't they?
But it was nice.
Okay. Anna has joined us, and it's a good time for her to rejoin us and have you on the screen as well, Mrs. M, because we're just talking about holistic health, alternative health, complementary health, whichever way you want to refer to it. Let's have a little bit of a discussion about that, if we may. We are generalizing. We're talking about Portuguese people in general and how they view these things. And we are having quite the major struggle in getting Anna on the screen to do that. Yeah. What's your view? I mean, we are, I think, quite unashamedly into complementary, alternative, holistic health medicine, whatever you'd call it. The oldest medicine, some others might call it, right? This modern medicine thing, by its very name, you can tell is a fairly newcomer to the scene. How have you found it getting access to therapists and supplements and stuff like that here in Portugal?
Initially, it was a bit difficult.
Yeah,
but that's just because I didn't know where to look. But it doesn't take long to find that Portugal has got pretty much the same range of therapists that you'd hope to see in the UK. I don't know about America, but I mean, it's pretty good. Yeah, you just have to look a little bit at first and get to know somebody who is Portuguese and who likes natural health, and they normally hook you up.
It's like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Suddenly you're in the wardrobe and you come out on the other side, don't you, into the Narnia of Portugal.
And then you realise actually that it's going on all around you. One of our friends of the show, Jenny Lowe's, she shared with me a link to a Facebook page that is sort of like Portuguese and English, and it's all really far out, and there's all sorts of different things going on in Portugal. It's just when you land, you don't see it.
Yeah, so true.
Because it's generally kind of a hidden thing, because it's not super widely accepted when it comes to society. It's still a bit shunned socially.
Is it?
So it's still kind of a thing, like it's done hidden, so to say. But I think people are getting more and more open. And personally, I think that the holistic therapy can be an amazingly positive complement to traditional medicine, especially on the psychological side of things. And the psychological sides of things can be so important.
Yeah, well
and it can make so much difference on the physical health. And it's like Louisa was saying, it's therapy. It's a form of therapy. And one of the things that I believe it can be extremely lacking here in Portugal is actually the bedside manner of doctors. Like this is
I have heard that and
all over the place. And personally, I've had absolutely terrible experiences in the past, and I've been a bit traumatized. Oh, so cute. Cute
style. Yeah, I've heard of people having miscarriages and being in the Portuguese system and being really, really shocked. It was dealt with in a very sort of like matter-of-fact way. And I know when I had a miscarriage,
it's not just matter-of-fact way. I've experienced that myself. So I have endometriosis. And before I discovered, I actually spent 5 years until I got a diagnosis of endometriosis.
My goodness.
And unfortunately, that doesn't just happen in Portugal, because at the time I researched a lot and I saw a lot of other people complain, even in the UK. I think the UK is actually the NHS in the UK and in Portugal are quite similar when it comes to the way they approach things.
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
And for me, it was an absolutely terrible experience, those years of my life. That's actually one of the big reasons I came back into entrepreneurship. I lost my job at the time because I just wasn't in a condition to work, but I missed something, because when you are on medical leave here in Portugal, the state pays everything, but you have something called the Junta Médica. That is something that the state comes up and checks up if you are actually sick. Mm-hmm. And at the time, because it was my first time being on medical leave, I didn't know how Junta Médica worked. So I actually didn't receive one of the letters. And the second letter that I received, the deadline to justify not attending the first request had already passed. And no matter how many justifications I sent proving that I was actually sick, they didn't care. I lost the right to having the medical leave, and I actually had to return a month's salary that they paid me. So it was pretty absurd, and I had to leave the job I had, and that's one of the reasons I ended up.
That is awful. Really that's hugely disruptive, isn't it?
I must just apologise because a little smile came on my face, and it's not because of what you were sharing. It's because we've been overrun with kittens.
I think
that's a great problem to have. Yeah, my kittens are outside, and they have a little house outside that it's like their garden.
Of all the people, I think who would forgive us, it would be Savvy Cat Anna for having cats in the studio.
I mean,
you can have all the cats. I love cats.
And while we're on that subject, Anna, one of the cats this morning started to write an email. Well, I was trying to write an email, and my cat wanted me to email this message to you. It's like, I don't know, it's about 40 number 5s finishing with an E. I don't know what that means in cat language, but that was a message that the cat wrote out earlier this morning.
Yeah, I don't remember what number 5 is in numerology, but maybe
it's a message. Do you think it's a message?
E is the 5th number, so you could.
That cat is a genius.
It's just like a load of E's.
That's spooky. That is spooky.
Or you could say it's a load of 5s because the E.
Stop now! You're freaking me out. Good morning, all, says Bobby. Sorry, I can't join you today. Wi-Fi is terrible. So he's between bursts of Wi-Fi, I think. Sorry not to see you as well, Bobby, but I hope you're having a great trip wherever you are in the world.
Like my camera, his Wi-Fi. I actually had to change camera. I'm just using the computer one because.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, it may be that the message that the cat sent into the internet has disrupted everything. And cats are always trying to do that one way or another. If it's not tripping you up in the kitchen or the bathroom, there they are disrupting the internet with their coded messages like that. But that's a truly a shocking anecdote you shared with us there, Anna, about
one of the reasons at the time I started the Viking bar was because I kind of had to work on my own terms, and I eventually just started a business, and at the time I developed the Viking bar. And I guess the health side of things were a big reason that I went into entrepreneurship.
Incredible.
Do you still have the Viking bar?
Currently, a friend of mine is running that business. I passed it down to her, and it's currently under the name Caldeirão Lendário. I'll write it here.
Okay, fantastic. And it's in Porto. Okay, we're going to find out if you want to visit the Savvy Cat Viking Bar.
Sounds really interesting.
I mean, out of those difficult circumstances, obviously came a pretty good outcome.
And that friend of mine is actually also a holistic therapist. So.
Oh, okay. So that's what we were talking about, wasn't it? So I'm fascinated by this. There's not widespread acceptance. Is that like a residue from the the old days of Portugal, how people were quite regimented, and certainly on the face of it in the public sphere, you probably went to the teacher, the doctor.
Heavily Catholically doctrinated country, like Portugal still had a very tight religious doctrine and we also had the Inquisition and all of that, and then during the dictatorships time, the ideology was also very controlled. So it was only after the dictatorship that things slowly started to be a bit more accepted. But these things are always a very slow process.
Yeah,
so true.
Like I was saying when we started this conversation, I think it's a great compliment, especially because of bedside manner. And I think this is an education issue because there are a lot of people that go into medicine and become doctors because it's a lot of families even put a lot of pressure into that because it's a proper career, having a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever. And often these people are not even,
how to
compatible, so to say.
One of the things that gave it away to me when I arrived in Portugal was that they sell herbs in like proper, almost
in the supermarket.
They sell like really like lots of unusual herbs, like not ones that you're seasoning.
We use most of them to cook.
Yeah, really. I mean, they're all the kinds of herbs I might put. I used to make my own nutritional supplements, And so I would go to places like Neal's Yard in the UK, where they sell actual herbs for you to like concoct something, you know, medicinal or topical.
This is turning into
it's
like being on the bloody ark here at the moment.
This is just a theory of mine, but I think in the UK people remained a lot more open to some holistic and alternative ways, because the paganism and, you know, the Celtic culture and the Viking culture, they never completely disappeared in the UK, while here in Portugal they were pretty much eradicated.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. The two things there, the bedside manner, the idea that when a doctor tells you something, you just do what they tell you, and they can pretty much speak to you in the way that, like teachers, you know, the old-fashioned teachers, they talk to you how they want to talk to you, and you're expected to follow through on their on the instructions that they give you. And
it can be ridiculous. Like I started. Oh, Louisa's gone. I started this conversation because when Louisa was commenting, there she is, on the horrible bedside manners when people have miscarriages.
Yes.
Like when I started this whole endometriosis thing, I did have a second trimester miscarriage throughout it. And when you have a second trimester miscarriage, you can't do the chemical abortion. It has to be basically you have to give birth.
Yes.
Because it's already a developed body.
Yeah.
And it was an absolutely horrible process for me. I was sent to two different wrong departments, and I had to wait 3 weeks until I actually could start the process. And then when I was actually on the process, that they told me to go to the maternity urgencies at 8 a.m. and it was like 11 a.m. and nothing. And so I went to the reception and just asked, okay, so I've been waiting for a few hours, what's going on? And they just valiantly looked at me and said, you know, live babies have priority.
Oh my goodness.
Gosh.
How awful for you. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
And yes, for me, it was, honestly, I've had absolutely terrible experiences when it came to, you know, the psychological side and the way doctors and hospital staff speak. But that was my personal experience because, for example, my cousin and his wife, they also went through this, and I actually were accompanied on the same maternity that I was, and they had a pretty good experience, and they were followed very nicely and weren't treated the way I was. So often this is kind of just random and unlucky of who you get,
of course,
but it can have absolutely horrible consequences. And like after this, I had zero psychological support. I had to get appointments myself privately. Yeah. And I even when the support that I got a gynecologist at the time, and I told her that I thought I could have endometriosis. And after this whole thing, like I had already had a miscarriage, and she told me I was looking for diseases in magazines.
Yes.
Wow.
That's I mean, yeah, I understand why medical professionals do sometimes have an intake of breath or a resistance to people self-diagnosing, but sometimes it's absolutely spot on, as it sounds like it was for you there, Anna.
Because I think it's just silly. I think their job is to find the physical issues in our body.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is worse, to make exams and the person to be wrong, or to not make exams and the person to be right?
Quite. That would be the true scientific approach, wouldn't it? To eliminate and to investigate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing, Anna. And for somebody watching who's thinking, I just do not want to go through that kind of hell and horror. And we should say, as you said, you know, sometimes people are like that in the system. Sometimes they're the opposite. And I'm sure there will be medics who will be appalled to hear that.
Yes.
In a private
system,
system,
I found them in between, but that's one of the things in Portugal I would tendentially recommend to go with recommendations and
and thank you. And from the point of view of from a private healthcare, does going private mean you won't get things like that, or is it equally? Is it the same in private?
I would like
it's the same in private, but I think that's a bit more accountability. So in private, you can go and just write to management or write a review, and they will take it seriously.
Okay.
While in public, and this is also a bit of the problem of the system works in Portugal, and there is a lot of protection of incompetence. And the whole how hard it is to fire someone, and especially the doctors on the public health system that are generally on the board, and there is an extreme lack of doctors. So even when they are terrible, it's you need to have an absurd amount of people complaining and actually going to court for something to actually happen. So that's the problem with accountability.
Amazing insight today into the health system here. Thank you. Anna, you have something to add, Mrs. M?
Yeah. From speaking to two women, two expat women who've had a miscarriage here, I understand that there are some really useful groups that you can contact. And if anyone's interested, I'll find out the address and I'll get it put in your community.
Thank you. Well, and our very own Sharing Care Portugal as well with Mama Bear.
There was there's a group whereby there was somebody who spoke fluent Portuguese who was able to go in and speak to the hospital and find out what was going to happen, with remains of, with the actual baby and trying to get the baby back, and all sorts of issues that are really, really difficult to deal with when you don't speak the language, and also when you're in a state of confusion and grief. And I'm so sorry to any woman that's experienced that, having gone through it myself as well.
It's the kind of thing I don't wish on my worst enemy.
No, same here. I mean, it's a severe low point, isn't it?
And there is help available, as you're saying.
There is some help available, and I guess
it's knowing where, isn't it? That's the problem when you're a foreigner.
There are even associations now. There are, I know I joined one at a time, and there are, like you said, some groups and so on. But I can't imagine how much harder it is when you don't speak Portuguese, and not. I would say that, I don't know, not all doctors, or not even the majority of doctors in the public system speaks Portuguese. So going through that in the country that you can't even communicate properly with the people that are caring for you, it's hard. And I definitely think that having someone on your side speaking Portuguese would make the world of difference.
It does.
It's very isolating when you're going through it. And then you find out actually that most women have had one at one point. That's the thing. That's the big secret, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody really talks about it.
Yeah. So. And if I could extend that, it is, I think probably the biggest challenge foreigners have is when they have an acute health situation and they can't speak. I mean, who comes here in the early days of being here and has an acute health situation? How many of them would speak Portuguese? By their very nature of them being here, they're foreigners. Their level of Portuguese in an emergency and in a specialist medical situation will be compromised. So that I think that is among the worst things that can happen when you come here as a foreigner, and it's worth thinking about and maybe preparing and understanding what sort of plan you might have in that. In God forbid, you find yourself in that sort of situation. But we do know that people find themselves in those sort of difficulties. And Anna, thank you so much.
I do think that thankfully nowadays a big part of the Portuguese population does speak English, and especially younger people. So most of the times they do find a way to communicate.
Sure.
If you speak English, but yes, it's definitely a good thing to have some Portuguese speaker on your side. And actually the helpline that I actually still haven't launched, but I'm still planning to. I don't have enough people signed up yet, but it would also be something to help in this situation, that to call what to do, how does it work, eventually helping translate and that sort of thing. And I can think it can be a very important and useful service.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. And where can people find out about that, Anna?
In our homepage at the moment, we have a banner that is the SAMI helpline, and we are still looking for beta testers.
Okay, so if you want to get
unfortunately, I'm not offering it for free because, well, it will have to allocate time for my employees.
It'll be intensive.
Unfortunately, things can't be free.
But it'll be a bargain in the beta phase. And let me just make it clear, as I understand it, it's not a medical helpline, but should you find yourself in a medical emergency, you can get...
There is actually a medical helpline in Portugal that does have the option to speak English, and it is the Saúde 24.
Yeah.
And I can just check here on my phone number.
But that, I mean, there is a miracle moment sometimes for us foreigners. You won't know, you might have experienced it in another country, Anna, but sometimes there is a moment for the foreigner here where you can just give the phone to somebody. and the person on the other end of the line who speaks Portuguese will speak Portuguese to the person in front of you. And I can't tell you what a relief that is sometimes. Can you imagine if it wasn't a medical situation, for example, or a car situation or some emergency, and you can just hand over the phone and go, oh, please, can you just talk to this person for a moment? I'm too stressed to compute my basic Portuguese. That is a miracle moment for foreigners. It really is. And you're clearly offering that. That's amazing. And thank you, may I say as well, for being here and sharing so honestly and openly this morning. You know, what you said, you've given us great information about.
I think it's important to talk about these things. I think most people in my position and most relocation agencies, they just want to talk about the pretty butterfly things. But that's not the reality. I think people need to talk about everything and be prepared to what they come from. Otherwise, when they actually get the bad experiences, they will freeze.
Yeah.
Well said. And thank you for speaking personally as well. You didn't have to do that. You could have given us just the practical, technical information, but you chose to speak from a personal point of view.
I think that's also important because we were saying, like, these situations are way more common than people think. And most people don't want to talk about it. And even women health, I think in general, it's still not taken as seriously as it should be. Like, for example, endometriosis, it is estimated that it affects 10% of people, and the research is starting to be done now.
Yeah, incredible. Yes, and not the only sort of hidden disease or misunderstood disease. There are many, as we seem to find out on a regular and increasing basis. So have the open conversations, folks, and thank you for being here and having that open conversation with us today. Anna, is there anything else you would like to share with us this morning before you go off and have your own bon fin de semana?
I think I already shared a lot, but I would have to answer any of the questions you may have.
Well, I think given that you're waiting for some sort of diagnosis yourself now, we wish you the best of luck with that.
Yes, I'm on the digging phase, doing all kinds of exams. It's a pain, like doing the colonoscopy and the echography and that's everything. When you don't know exactly what's wrong and you just have to look for it.
Yeah, and that's a difficult phase to be in, isn't it? When you're facing an illness, is the not knowing. So we wish you the very best of that and send you lots of love and best wishes for discovery and fast recovery and healing with that situation. And I see you've moved. Does that mark the end of summer for you? The move from Caldas back up north to Porto?
I always go to Porto for health things because actually Caldas is very lacking on that. There is a public hospital, but it's very understaffed and under-equipped, and there is a small private clinic that I haven't had pretty good experiences with. So there is a new hospital, like you probably heard, the private hospital is under construction in Caldas, which I definitely think it's a very needed addition. But until it actually exists, I'm still running to Porto.
Fair enough. Well, all the best with that. And it's great to see you. Thank you so much. And have a bon fin de semana.
Yeah.
You too. Have a great weekend.
Have a wonderful weekend.
A great rest of show.
Thank you very much. Well, it's only 6 minutes. Yeah. We just tie a few loose ends up. And we've got children, dogs, kittens. Everybody's in the studio.
Everybody will show up. Okay.
Yeah. Ciao, ciao. Beijinhos, abrazos. Ciao, ciao. Ciao.